With Aaron Cresswell out of contract in the summer and Emerson failing to hit the heights he once has, left back is probably one of the weaker areas in West Ham's squad. Ollie Scarles has been fantastic in the few appearances he's made this season, but at just 19, there is a case for a stronger senior option. Thankfully, Jack and Darcy have been looking through Europe's top 8 leagues as well as their second divisions to find the perfect man for the job. But Jack, given the fact that we're expected to probably spend quite a lot of money on a lot of positions in the summer, the range of people we're going to be looking at is a little bit different this week.
Yeah, it's a little bit different to the last two videos. So striker and midfielder, we were looking maybe more for some premium players that were available for the number one picks that we had in those videos. I think we still believe that those are two of the positions where more of the finance should be spent in terms of bringing in high quality first 11 players. That's not to say that I don't think there isn't a case for a first choice left back. I just think if you were going to do it, I think it's about finding creative solutions and effectively finding ways that not to spend 25, 30, 35 plus on the position, because I actually just don't think that that's what the squad needs right now. There are too many other things to be done, which means there are a couple of players at the top of the list that you might be surprised we don't include, and those are two examples. Actually, there are a couple of other players that we're not going to be talking about, but the two best examples would be Matteo Ruggeri, 22-year-old at Atalanta, is kind of fantastic for the kind of player that Potter would want as a wing back. I think we learnt quite a lot about the different expectations of a wing back from the process that we have gone through just over the first few games, but then also from interviewing Charlie Benny, which is an entire special episode of the main podcast, which is up on our Patreon. He talked about wingbacks generally being used more for retention and progression, and actually their final third ability obviously being an important part of what they did for Potter at Brighton, but not necessarily the key part. And then when you look at Ruggeri, I suppose that's probably the weakest part of what he does. It's the final third elements, the shot creating actions and stuff like that, not necessarily the highest, but for retaining the ball, for passing it forwards, and for helping the team to progress, and then for defending aggressively, proactively, obviously operating in a high pressing system under Gasperini. He's obviously done that very well. And then the other player was Darcy's, which was Ryan Aït-Nouri, right?
Yeah, and I think obviously Ruggeri's kind of proven himself as a top player over the last couple of years. Ryan Aït-Nouri is someone that, he's only 23, and I'm not sure if many people realise that because he's been in the Premier League for so long. And for the kind of certainty you get of someone that can basically come in and kind of run that left flank for us without too much thought or adjustment for even player or squad, he's a really good option. Defensively, you need someone that can win their ground duels, and he does that just fine at Premier League level already. And then you want someone who's a reliable passer, technician, maybe can also progress you up the pitch like Jack was talking about. And whilst doing that via pass isn't Aït-Nouri's strong suit, he's shown for a few seasons that he's a really good carrier of the ball, and he's ranked in the top 19% of progressive carriers this season. I guess the issue with him is kind of exactly what the point you were sort of leading towards there, where for that level of certainty in a player who's still 2 years away from the end of their contract, how much are you actually going to have to pay to get him out of Wolves? But in terms of fit for the role, I think he would still be really good, but maybe just a bit too much on the premium side.
So if those are the premium options that are perfect for Potter, but maybe a little bit outside of our price range in the summer, Jack, who's the person you're going to speak about first in terms of maybe people who are a bit more achievable for West Ham?
Yeah, so I think the task was maybe using those two players and a couple of others as sort of comparison points, and trying to find players that are doing similar things maybe at lower levels or doing similar things and coming towards the end of their contracts and so on and so forth. So those were sort of the players that we were looking for. And anyone that's been interested in the stuff that I've been doing for the last few years won't be surprised by my first player. It's Quentin Merlin, 22-year-old at Marseille. It's a shame we're talking about him now after the move to Marseille under Roberto De Zerbi, of course, there. He was at Nantes beforehand and did fantastic things at Nantes. Technically, he is pretty exceptional. He's a fantastic footballer, capable on the inside, coming inside the pitch, holding width, which he's done incredibly well for De Zerbi so far at Marseille, and really so technically gifted that at points that didn't happen very often, but they could start him in central midfield, or if they needed to move him inside. Really, really very good as a passer, very good under pressure, incredibly secure, comparing maybe to examples that you wouldn't necessarily think of wing-backs, but were used as wing-backs at points under Potter at Brighton. Someone like Pascal Gross, someone who's very progressive, very secure, but doesn't necessarily have the physical profile that you would expect a wing-back to have. I would kind of put Quentin Mollin in the same sort of category. His biggest weaknesses are defensively. So in the duels, he's pretty slight. He's only 40% dribblers tackled success this season, 33% in the aerial duels, and only 20% with his own take-ons, which suggests to me that when he gets into sort of a physical battle with another player in Liga, he can be pushed off the ball a little bit too easily, and that is something that's backed up when you watch footage on him. But yeah, for the other metrics that you're looking for across the board, top 11% this season for expected assisted goals, shot creating actions, top 13% for pass completion, top 13% for crosses and carries, top 23% for progressive passes. He's a capable set piece taker. His contract actually only runs to 2028, which is a little bit of a surprise. I would have expected it maybe to be a bit of a longer contract for such a talented young player going to Marseille. A really, really good option, a player with a lot of ability. We have an example of him at Nantes doing that classic element that you want from a player in this position, overlapping around the left-hand side and then whipping a delightful ball to the back stick for Ludovic Blas to head in. So perhaps slightly more expensive than the player I'm going to go for second. So that's why he would fall into third for me.
And if anyone has listened to the breakdown or anything Jack's done over the last couple of years, which subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can. My God, the guy comes up a lot. I've heard Jack speak about him a lot. Maybe not as much as the next option he's going to go with, but we'll get to that when we get there. Darcy, who's your first person up on the list?
Yeah, so my number 3 pick is Joaquin Saiz. He's a versatile wing-back, left-footed, but capable of playing on both the left and the right. More of his minutes have actually come on the right recently, but we'll get into that more as we move on to our second player. He's not the most physical, but he's still 19. He's yet to kind of bulk out, I think, around 5'10", but what he does come with is a massive bundle of energy and pace, and it means that he can quite easily run up and down the flank for 90 minutes on his own, and opponents often struggle to kind of match that level of physicality across the match. So out of possession, he'll use it to jump up, support the press, win the ball in the attacking third. But then also he'll make lots of kind of vertical movements up and down the pitch with the ball as well, link up with players inside the pitch through 1-2s. I really think if he could just 1-2 down the pitch all day, he probably would. And then in those kind of situations where he is getting a lot of the ball, you see a lot of technical security when receiving, and that's on either foot as well because he's often changing side. And it means when he looks to kind of get more involved in the attacking sense further up the pitch, his passing is really reliable and you don't get much variance from action to action. His pass completion rate places him in the top 9% of fullbacks in the Belgian league this season at the minute. And then I'd say what is probably his biggest upside is if he receives the ball up high, a pass isn't on, or the situation really is asking for a player who can dribble it at an opponent. He's one of the better dribbling wing-backs in the Belgian top flight as well. He carries quite directly at opponents, and I think it's because of the two-footedness. It's not as simple for the defender as just showing him down the line or showing him inside, because he can go either way. He's in the top 7% in Belgium, among Belgian fullbacks in terms of his success in take-on situations. But I think the thing with him at the minute is that all of this great work doesn't necessarily translate into chances created, goal contributions enough just yet. For example, his shot creating actions from open play passes is only just above the median for the league. I don't want to make out that he's not creative, because he is. He has a nicely shaped cross, for example. He also can come inside and kind of link up that way. But I think maybe a combination of like a lack of consistent minutes being kind of early on in his career and often being played off the right instead of his preferred left, maybe capping his output a little bit. And I guess maybe one of the things people might be thinking as well is, okay, you're bringing forward a really good young player, but you're getting someone that's the same age as like an Ollie Scarles. And maybe you're getting in the way of his sort of development pathway. But what I'd say to that is Saiz can play both sides. He's someone that can maybe come in when Scarles is having a poorer period on the left and play there, but then still give us an option on the right in the same way that like a Wan-Bissaka does. But the lack of kind of goal creating output so far in his career leaves him as just my number 3 pick at the minute.
Very fair. And at a young age as well, he recently got called up for the Belgian for the full squad. He hasn't made an appearance for him yet, but I mean that shows the levels we're talking about here as terms of his potential and what he's actually doing when he's on the pitch as well. Jack, what about your second pick?
Yeah, I think just briefly on Saiz, I think he's a great option, particularly because there's so much that needs to be done in the fullback positions with Cresswell likely moving on. So far, probably not far behind him, and then Emerson also not on a massively long contract and not performing particularly well this season. So having someone who's flexible, plays on both sides, young, and has a huge amount of potential is a really, really attractive option. Another attractive option for entirely different reasons is Adrien Truffert, someone I've talked about for ages, 23 years old at Rennes. His performance this season has been nowhere near what we know he's capable of. In fact, over the last 2 seasons, I think he's been far less effective for Rennes down their left-hand side. But his contract is almost up now. It's up in 2026, so he's going into the last year of his contract come the summer. And I think that means that this is quite a big opportunity. And when you look at Rennes' performance more generally over the last 2 years, it's been a bit of a struggle over there. And I think when you look back to how he was doing under Genesio, you see that he's actually 12% higher in terms of his percentile rank in Liga for pass completion, a whole 60% higher under Genesio 2 seasons ago for shot creating actions from open play. He got 6 assists that season. He was taking 56% percentile ranks higher for touches, and he was also 17 percentile ranks higher for take-on percent. So I think, talking about what he was doing as a 21-year-old, I think you can see that the talent was there, absolutely. And I don't think we can say that talent has gone. I just think that his role has changed. One thing that I think is part of that, and we have to talk about it, given we are talking about wing-backs, is that he has been moved often into a more advanced role, where previously he was starting as more of an out-and-out fullback in a back four. So although it's a bit different now with him receiving higher and not doing quite so well, I think that those attributes physically, to be able to get up and down for a whole game, to sprint in the way that he does, are still useful attributes and still the kind of thing that we should be looking for in a player on the left-hand side. What I really like about him is his defensive work, which is very reliable. He's very aggressive as a defender. He's very useful as a presser, which is something that we'll want in whoever we target for this role. If you were looking for possibly the biggest opportunity at an under-23 level in the sort of top 5 leagues, I think Triffert's kind of that by a mile, to be honest. It's kind of rare that you find someone who's got the back catalogue as a young player that he had. Or has really, with a 1-year contract, and therefore probably not worth a huge amount, especially given how poorly his side are doing in Ligue 1 at the moment. Perhaps not the top end quality of some of the other players that we're going to be talking about in this list, and not doing quite so well for form. And therefore, if you were thinking more about promoting Ollie Scarles and stuff like that, and not wanting to put someone young ahead of him who probably needs a little bit of development and a little bit of time to return to his best form, then perhaps not the best option from that perspective.
Although, out of everyone on the list, he's the only one I've heard you talk about more than Merlin over the last several years. Outside of that one other fullback who doesn't make the list because he's not the right type of guy, but shout out Melvin Bard, my guy. Darcy, your next option.
Yeah. My next option is also playing for Club Brugge. He's the guy in the left wing-back spot. So actually the guy keeping size out of his preferred position is Maxime de Kuiper. He's a player that excels at providing particularly the in-possession upside of kind of a wing-back's role. He's someone you'll see positioned right on the last line in any sort of attacking phase, most likely holding the width out on the left, and the ball is very often in a Bruges game just sprayed out to him. And in those situations, he's really technically sound. First touch is almost always clean, and when the space is there, it's positive as well. He takes it forward into the space rather than maybe a little bit more conservative backwards, and then he's able to use things like his great agility, quick feet to drive at a defender. He'll mix in step overs, ball rolls, is happy to move the ball onto his right foot at times, come inside. So there's lots of unpredictability, but also he doesn't over attempt. He's happy to receive high, attract some pressure, and then just move the ball backwards. And that combination of really strong technical dribbling ability, but also measured decision making, one means he has a top 5% take on success rate among Belgian Pro League fullbacks this season, but also the fact that he can fulfill like the attacking upside role whilst also being able to be someone that can help us retain the ball. And then in phases of, I guess, of more sustained pressure in the opposition third, he's capable of kind of fulfilling the Jurrien Timber at Arsenal role, where instead of moving out right wide on the left, he actually inverts into kind of like the fullback to 10 space. So he kind of gives you some tactical variability in that way, and that kind of variability in his attacking threat means that in Belgium he's one of the most productive fullbacks in the league, top 1% for shot creating actions from live passes. But of course, with all that kind of in possession upside, there are some drawbacks. Not strong really in any of the defensive aspects of what the role requires. He's ranked below the 50th percentile for ground duel success rate, ball recoveries, and then even his supporting of the press via tackles in the attacking third. It's not particularly positive reading, but I did catch him in the Champions League against Juve a couple of weeks ago, and there were a couple of moments that I actually thought he handled really well and kind of indicated there is a sort of defensive base there. So there's one situation in particular where they're defending their box and the Juve number 9 runs between De Kuyper and his left centre-back. And he just about catches himself before he goes to kind of track the run because he realises, oh, I'm being baited. So then the Juve right winger is free to receive the ball and take a shot. And then when that player does end up receiving the ball, he stood his ground and is able to go in and actually be really strong in the duel. He not only wins the ball, but he manages to floor the winger in the process. And he gave Juve really no sniff down that left side the whole game. I do think from watching him, there's something strong defensively there, but it is that data that keeps him being my number 2 and not my number 1.
Well, before we get there, of course, remember that you can get this an extended edition of this show where Jack and Darcy go through all of the players that you're hearing about today, plus a whole bunch more. It's an interesting position win back, especially under Graham Potter, so there's a lot of people to talk about. And that's over at patreon.com/Analytics United. Remember, the first 7 days is free, so if you head on over there now, you can watch that show, which will be available literally this second. No matter what time you watch it, it goes live at the exact same time. And you can get info on a whole bunch of more players, wildcard picks, the whole lot. Patreon.com/Analytics United. The first 7 days is free. Jack, let's talk about your number 1 pick.
Yeah, before we do that, on tier 2, we've covered all 4 of the players we've spoken about so far on Euro Review as well, which is a show we do covering teams around Europe and looking at players that West Ham could be interested in. And we've covered my number 1 pick as well with Stuttgart, Maximilian Mittelstadt. He's 27, which might be a bit of a surprise given that we're mostly looking at under 23 options across the rest of this list, and because we're trying to look for creative, cheaper options. Mittelstadt isn't that, but I think when we were looking for someone who would be a clear number 1 pick in the under 23 range that would be able to make a massive improvement for the starting 11 right now, there wasn't for me a clear option beyond the player that Darcy's gone for. So I kind of had to look at it a little bit differently and try and find someone who I knew could be really, really good for the team, but also knew wouldn't cost a ridiculous amount of money to bring in. And Mittelstadt, I think, fills that kind of space because of the fact that his form is just really surprising at Stuttgart. It wasn't really expected of him. I think he went to Stuttgart for less than $1 million from Hertha Berlin. He hadn't had incredible form there. But since he's been with Stuttgart, he's been pretty bonkers, to be honest. He's been incredible. I think he's turned out to be kind of everything that we maybe expected someone like David Raum to be a few years ago before his move to Leipzig. He's made his way into the German national squad. He's got 11 appearances now, 2 goals, 2 assists, which is pretty incredible return as well. Top 9% in the Bundesliga this season for take on success, top 15% for dribblers tackled. So really excellent in all of the challenges. So the stuff that we were speaking about with Quentin Merlin when it comes to sort of physical battles with other players and maybe not being quite so good, Mittelstadt is very good in those areas. He is in the top 1% or the top player in Bundesliga this season in his position for amongst fullbacks for shot creating actions, and the top 5% for progressive passing. I think the big thing about him as well is his decision making in the final third is generally excellent. So when we're talking about Potter wanting to play cutbacks, that's absolutely something that Mittelstadt can do. When you look at what he produced for Germany, he's shown that at international level with that cutback for Gundogan, where Gundogan pocketed into the corner. Really nice decision making from Mittelstadt, patience, good run, exploiting the space that was created by Jamal Musiala. So we're talking about that front 5, using the winger to come inside, draw the fullback across, and then want the fullback to be able to overlap and exploit that space and make the right choice with a first time cross. That's definitely part of his game. In fact, I would say it's one of the key parts of his game. And one thing that we also spoke about on the breakdown on extra time after the Aston Villa match is the value for Potter's side of having players that are comfortable coming in as well off the flank and using their weaker foot to create chances. And we saw how useful that was with Wan-Bissaka in that game. That's something Mittelstadt has done incredibly recently for Stuttgart against Slovan Bratislava, racing forward on a counter-attack, drawing the defender close to him, cutting inside, and then playing a really, really, really nice pass out to Fabian Rieder on the right flank, who was able to score in that game. His defensive numbers are really nice and strong as well. 65% success in the aerial duels. When we talk about as well how much we expect the player to be involved and retain the ball, he does really well there. 93% of his short passes are completed. He's playing 78 passes per 90, so hugely involved in everything that Stuttgart do. Receives deep, receives in the middle third, receives in the final third, just as important kind of in all phases of the game. Nearly 7 crosses per match, so when you're thinking about having Thomas Soucek in the squad as a target to aim for, crashing the box, Niklas Füllkrug, his German international teammate as well, being in the squad, another really good player in the air. I think 2 really good targets for all of his crossing work. And then the lack of a set piece taker, which is something that we spoke about in the midfielders video, with Lamine Camara being my top pick because of that extra bit that you get from him in the same way that we got from Ward-Prowse. Contracted to 2028, so would be a little bit more expensive. But for an outstanding player that gives you probably 4 years and makes a massive difference to the first team and massively improves us in that position, and probably the cheapest option around the top 5 leagues for doing that, I think Mittelstadt is a really, really nice pick.
Came out of nowhere and has been absolutely killing it. It's incredible to watch what he's done at 27 to just all of a sudden burst out like he has been amazing to watch. But Darcy, what about your top choice?
Yeah, so mine is Miguel Gutierrez. He's currently playing for Girona, 23 years old. Just a really classy footballer, to be honest. He plays left back, obviously, but I think that's almost a little bit misleading because the role he plays for Girona is, I think, a lot more than that. We'll start with technical capability. I think he's more in the mould of like a great La Liga midfielder, unbelievably talented passer, and along with that, the way he kind of positions himself around the pitch and reads the game is very much like a midfielder, I think. And as a result, he's often given a bit more license to kind of roam that left-hand side of the pitch, maybe move into midfield, act as a bit more of a midfielder. And what that allows Girona to do is basically exert control on the game because he's so technically impressive. He's really press resistant, always makes good decisions with the ball, but also it gives him more angles to use his passing ability to progress play. And he does that at a rate that puts him in the top 20% of La Liga fullbacks, whilst also having the ability to carry forward regularly too. And then in the attacking third, you get a player that provides you with so much flexibility, variation, and then is a supremely dangerous creator as well. Maybe not like Trent Alexander-Arnold levels in terms of numbers, but very much, I think, in that sort of style, in the way he operates on the left. Sometimes you'll find him out really wide, looking to whip balls in with his left foot. Sometimes you'll see him a little bit more reserved, offering some level of transitional cover, helping to circulate the ball. Sometimes he'll be on the last line, kind of in the half space, looking to bounce or receive and bounce the ball back, and again, help retain the ball high up the pitch. But at his most dangerous, in my opinion anyway, he'll be in the left half space, dropping off the last line to receive and taking the ball on the turn. And his ability to play on the turn and then wait his pass, kind of have an image of what's going on behind him and then execute a pass really quickly thanks to his vision, I think really are all off the top shelf. He really regularly hits that kind of familiar, dangerous whipped cross to the back post, but then can also play more incisive passes into the box, chip passes into the box. There's so much possibility, and it allows him to be a top 3% creator from live passes in the Liga. I'm aware that I've probably made him sound like maybe the best player to ever do it, and he is really good, so I don't apologise for that at all. But we do have to talk about the more defensive side of his game a little bit, I think. The physicality, getting up and down the left-hand side, kind of making that wing his own. I don't think he has too many issues with that. And then helping the team in situations where they need to counter-press, I think his instincts are fine. He reads the play really well, positions well in terms of protecting the team from defensive transition, and then hoovers up a lot of loose balls as a consequence. Top 3% for ball recoveries among La Liga fullbacks this season. However, ability in the duels has some big question marks around it. 50% win rate in his ground duels, which is in the bottom 22% of La Liga fullbacks, and then bottom 6% for aerial duels with a rate of only 25%. And that is slightly hard to ignore when you're looking at a player who's going to come into a Premier League team. But the dueling aspect aside, an unbelievably good footballer and someone that helps you exert an immense amount of control on games with how smart they are as a footballer. And I think the benefit of that control, while still doing all the things that we would need from the left wing back role, makes him my number one choice.
We should have signed him from Castilla. I mean, he went to Girona for what, just over 3 million quid. He was doing enough for Real Madrid's B team to obviously be a very, very talented player. So yeah, one of those where I feel slightly disappointed that we missed the boat going early on him.
Yeah, that's the way in it. Sometimes you have to take the choice. Sometimes you have to take the punt, but sometimes, let him loose and then come in and swoop in as a Premier League big boy, get that London premium, come play in London, mate. Come on. Whether he'll back that or not, I don't know what his vibe is, but it's something we've done in the past. Maybe we can do it again here. Something you should do is check out patreon.com/Analytics United. The link is in the description below. 7 days is free. Not only is the extended version of this and the Euro review that Jack was referencing, where we've covered a lot of these players before, but also the plan is once our initial run of these videos, which will be carrying on past the January transfer window is done, we're going to be taking some suggestions, maybe some polls to vote on what we should be covering in going forward in the future in this series. We've already had one suggestion which is really good, which we have written down on our list. So if you want to suggest some of that sort of stuff, patreon.com/Analytics United, get involved. But Jack, Darcy, beautiful work as per usual. Some great options, some great words said. I liked a lot of those words. Good job on that. And cheers everyone for watching. Subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.